Even Ukrainian media have begun to criticize Zelensky. Shortly before Russia and Ukraine were set to launch their third round of negotiations, Ukraine's Kyiv Independent published an editorial accusing Zelensky of betraying Ukraine's democracy and all those who have fought for it. What is behind this? The media stated that on July 23, the parliament, dominated by pro-Zelensky lawmakers, voted to strip Ukraine's key anti-corruption institutions, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau and the Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, of their independence. Under the new law, the Prosecutor General will take over the supervisory authority for anti-corruption investigations, which means that Zelensky's office can halt any investigation with just a phone call. The Kyiv Independent pointed out that this move is not an isolated incident but part of a large-scale crackdown. President Zelensky is choosing to undermine Ukraine's democratic system in exchange for the expansion of his personal power. Ukrainian media pointed out that at the time of this incident, Ukraine's anti-corruption agencies were investigating a senior official, Oleksiy Chernyshov, Zelensky's personal friend and current deputy prime minister. The Kyiv Independent stated that elections cannot be held under wartime conditions, and more importantly, large-scale street protests have largely disappeared. Many of Ukraine's most patriotic and uncompromising citizens are either serving on the front lines or have died in battle. When this editorial was published, Ukraine also saw its first anti-government protest since the start of the war, targeting the newly passed bill, with protesters calling it a blatant endorsement of corruption. Domestic media, unlike in the early days of the war when they were united, have begun to turn against the government. This is just one of the many predicaments facing Zelensky. His biggest challenge, of course, remains on the battlefield. Russia achieved 7 times the results in 2024 compared to the previous year, and its advance has not slowed down in 2025. On the local time of the 22nd, after months of silence on the front line, Russian troops suddenly infiltrated Krasnohorivka. As a key transportation hub northwest of Donetsk, Krasnohorivka is traversed by multiple railways and highways connecting Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Since 2014, it has served as Ukraine's defensive and logistical hub in the Donetsk region. Now, with sufficient personnel and firepower, Russian forces have launched a fierce offensive, and the declining momentum of Ukraine's frontline troops can no longer be concealed. In such a situation, there is no way to talk about national economic development. And with stagnant development, the distribution of interests will only become more sensitive to the nerves of the people. Under such circumstances, Zelensky is thinking more about consolidating his own power. Because once he loses the presidency, he will undoubtedly face investigations and trials. Therefore, he needs to prioritize appointing more compliant officials. One of the important means to win over these people and maintain their loyalty may be to allow them to engage in corruption, which can be seen from the long-standing accusations by Ukrainian media. This is precisely the point that the Kyiv Independent harshly criticized. The media has called on the West to intervene to restrain Zelensky's overwhelming power. However, what the West is most concerned about is not whether Ukraine is corrupt or clean. Previously, their focus was on how to make Russia unsustainable and force it to back down. But now divisions have emerged within the Western camp. The United States is more concerned about how to gain as much economic benefit as possible from Ukraine and reduce its losses from supporting the war. Regarding the outcome of the war, European leaders like Macron and Meloni still hold some obsessions out of considerations for European autonomy or Russophobia, but Trump may already be indifferent. Seymour Hersh, a veteran U.S. investigative journalist, reported on his blog on July 19 that the United States is discussing forcing a regime change in Kyiv. In the article, he wrote, "A Washington official told me that if U.S. President Trump makes up his mind, Zelensky will be put on the exile list. If Zelensky refuses to leave, he will be forced to leave by force." This is clearly a deliberate or unintentional warning, reminding Zelensky that the U.S. government is not satisfied with him and has not taken action only because the time is not yet ripe. In fact, as early as November 2024, Russian media revealed that the United States believed Zelensky had too much power and wanted to replace him. Now, the editorial published by the Kyiv Independent could well be a prelude to Washington's operation in this matter, as media has always been one of the key areas for U.S. external infiltration. According to Hersh, Valery Zaluzhnyi, the current British ambassador and former commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces, who was previously regarded as Zelensky's biggest rival, is the most likely candidate. This power transition may occur in the coming months. Zelensky's personal interests and Ukraine's national interests now have already developed a serious conflict. There may still be people in Ukraine who trust the West. Yet fewer and fewer people still believe in Zelensky. No matter how Ukrainian media attacks, or whether the US is pulling strings behind the scenes, Zelensky owes his people an explanation, not just relentless defiance.